Hey there, and welcome back to the Total Potential Podcast. I'm Cole here today with a badass mama that I cannot wait to talk to, Kimberly Biback. So glad to have you here, Kimberly. Thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thank you all for spending a little bit of time with us because time is valuable and we don't take that lightly at all. So thank you for being here to join us in a little conversation. Kimberly, before we really dive in, Kimberly does remarkable physical feats. And it's, we could probably have a whole entire conversation just about that. But my experience is that there's usually a lot of layers underneath pursuing those types of physical experiences. And so before we really dive into some of the really gnarly and fun things that you do and why you do them, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ever even came into a space where you wanted to pursue something like a physical crucible?
Sure, absolutely. So I was never actually into fitness in the past. And the interesting thing is, with my experience, I had a job way back when I was a teenager, and it wasn't a job that I was a major fan of. I really loved my employers, but I wasn't interested in what I did. So there was no passion. And, there was a couple of times that I actually fell asleep at my desk. So I was at this job as a means to provide. At the time, I was living on my own. I had left home at 15, and I was also sending money home to my parents. And it was strictly a job that I needed. And as much as I was grateful for it, I didn't feel challenged by it. I didn't feel like it was something that was utilizing the skills the skill set that I had at the time. When winter came around, I typically ended up with seasonal affective disorder. Happens to a number of people. And I used to get kind of really depressed, and I used to gain weight. And I remembered at one point or another thinking, something that I'm doing isn't right. And I need to figure out what to do to make this better. And my entire life was always about being solution driven. So I didn't like the idea of counting reps at a gym. Absolutely hated that idea. But I thought, we live in a country where the opportunities are endless. So I just have to think about something that I am passionate about and tie that into something that's going to keep me healthy and fit, especially over the winter months. So one thing I've always appreciated is heights. Absolutely love heights.
We have a little difference there, Kimberly.
It made sense at the time that I would go to a climbing gym. There was one downtown Toronto. It was called Rock Oasis, 60-foot walls. And I thought, I'll just go climb. And I really didn't know the impact at the time that it would have on, how it played out for my future life. But when I started climbing, number one, when you're climbing those walls, it's like figuring out puzzles as you go. It was very mentally stimulating. I used to spend 4 to 6 hours a night, 5 to 6 days a week. And I was toned and fit in every aspect of my body. It was good strength and cardio wise everywhere.
Yeah.
So that was my intro to fitness. And I found that once I got into doing something that made me physically feel better, it also helped the emotional side and the mental side. And it made me more passionate, even in the mundane aspects of my life at the time.
Yeah.
So the more that I stuck with that, things like seasonal affective disorder, I haven't had that since.
Wow. That's remarkable. You touch on, first of all, how old were you when you first started climbing?
16.
Wow. And so had you experienced athletics in any form up until then, or was rock climbing kind of your first first exposure to physical movement?
I always liked, growing up, the ability to compete. I would compete in track events. I even competed in events that I wasn't that good at because I liked the idea of a challenge and putting myself out there. But as for just doing it for the sake of being healthy and fit, that was never, ever my thing.
Yeah. Okay. So you're 16, you start climbing. like, how does it, did you realize at 16 that it was having this profound transformation on you? Or is that something you kind of like, as you look back, see that transformation? Cause I'm just imagining like my own 16-year-old mind, like, how much of that do we take in? But for some people, like our minds are really mature at 16. So what was your experience with that?
I knew that it was something that I was missing and needed. I knew that I
Mm,
didn't have balance in all areas of my life. And I knew that movement was something that was extremely lacking. I had a desk job, like most people,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I was sitting for 8 to 9, sometimes 10 hours a day. And then I'd go home and sit some more because I didn't feel like doing anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once I got into that and I started achieving that area of balance, it opened the door to so many different aspects.
Yeah.
And I mean, the three philosophies that I've always had ever since, even before leaving home. But number one is to go out there and to do at least one good thing for somebody else every day.
Mm,
If you can do more, you do more, but at least one, right?
yeah.
Number two is force yourself to do something that you don't want to do, right? And part of that is, looking for things that challenge yourself because it's easy to do things you want to do, right?
Hmm.
And number three is to take time to be still and mindful, right?
Mm.
And that's kind of been my overall balance throughout the course of my life. And the funny thing is, when I got married and I had my child, going rock climbing for, 4 to 6 hours a night.
Was no longer part of the deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
So at that point in my life, I was working for Staples Canada. And in that capacity, we had a gym on site and I decided to sign up for it. And they had fitness classes, different types of boot camps and different types of things I'd never experienced before. So I didn't have the climbing, but I knew that I needed to replace it with something that would maintain that balance.
Hmm.
And I used to be the type of person that would work through all my breaks. I would never take a moment to pause and do anything else. And I realized that it was actually taking away from what I could offer my job. So at the time, when I'd take the lunch hour break to go do a fitness class, I would go back to my role even more passionate than I already was, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, they had a Learn to Run 5K program and a Learn to Run 10K program. I was always a sprinter, the person in me that loved the challenges, but I never liked long distance running.
Yeah.
So for somebody like me that I grew up with very serious asthma,
Mm.
I used to end up in the hospital for 2 months every single summer.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it was something, the idea of running a long distance and putting myself out there and putting that on the line, it was scary and extremely uncomfortable. And I thought, perfect, I'm going to sign up for that. So that was May 2016. And
Wow.
by October 2016, wanting to put this new skill to the test, I signed up for and ran my first marathon.
Whoa, which is way more than a 5K.
That's right.
Okay, we have to peel apart some of these layers because there are so many like important and valuable things that you've just shared. Number one, I talk to people about this all the time. We cannot separate our bodies from our mind emotion system. They are totally connected. We cannot separate them. The fact that at 16 you were able to realize the additional effects and the beneficial effects that you saw in those other areas of your experience because you started moving your body, such an important lesson. Jake and I always say like what a gift it was that we were athletes before we were ever like not athletes, because we, as soon as it's gone, it's almost like instantaneous recognition of like, whoa, something is different here, and you feel it throughout. And so the fact that you have that reference to like, oh, I'm somehow like much better now than I was before this happened is so impactful. That other thing that you mentioned that I'm really excited to have more of a conversation about is that piece of balance, right? Like we're so deeply conditioned to perform, and put out and check as many boxes as we can in the places that sort of like please other people, whether that's at our job or, you know, how we serve in our community, like whatever area that is. There's so much pressure to perform, but we perform better when we are in balance and cared for. I love that you use that word balance, because it's so true. Like, sometimes it can feel like one more thing to pursue. Like, oh, I also, not only do I have to perform my job, but I also have to go to the gym. And then I also have to make meals that are healthy for me. Like sometimes it can feel very task oriented, but you were experiencing that, like your passion was more, your performance at work was more, just by carving out that space where you were taking care of yourself. Oh, okay. So those are the first two things you said that I was like, yes. And then the last thing you mentioned about the 5K to the marathon, like stepping toward that fear of, I have had this experience of asthma. I have this experience of like, I'm not into running long distance, but now I'm walking toward that. I mean, that's remarkable. Like, tell me a little bit about like the mental transition from like, I'm not so much a runner to like, in October, I'm running a marathon.
Well, it's funny because originally the running program was ending, I believe, in July. So it was May to July.
Okay.
And there's always got to be in my mind a goal and some sort of outcome for what you're doing, right? And when I wanted to put it to the test, you know, the next logical sequence would have been, you know, if I'm going to put myself a little bit out there, go in and do a half marathon. And I thought at the time, I really pictured this in my head. Like if I get to, and I have no problem with the half marathon thing, just putting that out there.
Yeah.
But if I get to that halfway point, I'm just always going to feel like I only half did something, right? So I overlooked the fear of that longer distance to the idea of completing something in full and putting myself fully out there, right? And you know, at any time you're challenging yourself, we're supposed to have a little bit of fear about it. It means that we've considered it, we're taking it serious. It actually means that we're really embracing the idea of taking on a challenge, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have a little bit of fear, you're probably not challenging yourself enough. And I usually look at that as, okay, so I'm challenging myself and I'm embracing this. And that fear turns more into excitement because I'm excited to bring it on. I'm excited to put it on the line. I'm excited to see where it leads.
Yeah. I love that. And I couldn't agree more that like, if there's not a little bit of fear, we're probably not walking far enough. Like there's probably something more to go toward. Because if it's easy and comfortable in a
We know it.
space, yeah, we know it. It just is. It's like there is, yeah, the chance to grow from that comfort is just, you know, minimal, unless
That's
there's
right.
something surprising that happens in that comfortable space. And yeah. Okay. So you run a marathon. This is 2016, you said.
Yes.
Okay. So is that the first like big sort of physical crucible event that you pursued? I mean, rock climbing to me is a massive crucible event, but in terms of like a one-time event, was that your first of that
Yes.
type? Okay. So then tell me what's happened since 2016, because I've seen even just on like your Instagram, like remarkable things that you have pursued in like recent past. So I can't wait, you know, over 5 years, I can't wait to hear what some of those events have been.
Well, I wanted to, as I said, maintain that balance and maintain the ability to grow more and do more. And one thing that, you know, drives us and gets us out of bed each day is when we have that overall purpose and fulfilling, you know, one of my pillars, my daily pillars, the serving others. The one thing that I believed would keep me tied to and connected with all my goals and keep them real for me would be to tie it to something in the community that mattered to me, right? And I recognize that if I'm going to have the physical and health side, that there's many opportunities out there to use that to benefit meaningful causes in the community, right?
Mm.
So back in 2019, the Navy SEALs came to Canada, and
Awesome.
it was the SEALFIT event that we all know. The difference was it was tied to an organization called Baycrest, and they are leaders in early onset Alzheimer's and dementia research.
Mm.
And then the funny thing is, at the time, I was debating doing an ultra marathon. And the exact same day that I saw, or that I was planning to register for this ultra marathon, I saw the Baycrest SEALFIT event.
Mm.
And at the time, I had been participating a lot in OCR events and gyms, and I'd had a major injury to my wrist that had had a couple of surgeries. So I remembered looking at the leaflet, and I saw 6 hours, 12 hours, and 24 hours. And one of the requirements in the 24-hour event was the 100 pull-ups.
Yeah.
And I remembered thinking, okay, so 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and you've got that 75-minute time cap. And I remembered thinking I could probably do the push-ups and squats, but not so sure about those pull-ups, right?
Mm.
And sort of going back to the marathon, I actually, in this case, I had signed up for 12 hours. I'm like,
Okay.
there's no way I'm going to get through the 100 pull-ups. There's no way, right? And it was maybe a week after signing up for that, I was like, I can't sit there and sign up for half the event. I need to do the full thing. So I switched categories, and I'm like,
Wow.
I'll just find a way to train myself and get myself there. And the biggest thing about training for that event, um, I know a number of people, they read all the books that were out there, they had coaches. I didn't have any of that, but what I did have was an immense amount of life experience, an immense amount of determination. And I figured, okay, they're going to come here and they're going to make things as challenging as possible. So if I make things even more challenging on my end, and literally I trained 10 or 20 times harder than anything that I thought that we would be asked to do.
Wow.
And we were really given no information. So this was kind of many tiers of the unknown, right? So I'm not sure what we're going to be asked to do, but if I train literally everything in the highest amount, then there's no possible way I'm going to get there and not do this, right?
Yeah.
And I also, overlapping that unknown, I signed up to participate in martial arts. So it was the first year, exactly around the same time that I signed up for this event, I decided to take on karate. And this is something that was way, way, way outside of my comfort zone. Way outside. It was something that I really knew nothing about, but it was something that resonated with me because it ties mind and body together,
Yeah.
right? And I really liked the idea of tying mind and body into physical action, but also reeling it into, the way you think and express yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many curiosities right now because for people not familiar with the SealFit event, in the 24-hour event, part of that performance requirement happens like halfway in, and you are done with the event. You are peace out. Thanks for coming if you do not complete the standard. And so there is a lot at stake, I would say, from a physical training perspective, to be prepared for 6 hours into a grueling event to meet a performance standard that is challenging to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can stay. And so as I was imagining your like, okay, no, I'm not going to do the 12, I'm going to do the 24, knowing that that's part of the program, that was kind of my curiosity. Like, how did you train the mental side of that? Because it is one thing to train the physical side, and there's
Right.
tons of training that you can do, but those events are designed to break the physical capacity so that you have to go to something deeper. And so
Right.
was karate like a main vessel for you training that, or were there other like mental practices you were pursuing? How did you train the other non-physical part?
So the mental thing, I've always been pretty lucky to have. I've never ever quit anything in my life.
Hmm.
Having said that, you never know how you're going to be tested in an event like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to plug a name here because it's well deserved. But my dojo, it's a Northern Karate Schools. It's one of the oldest dojos in Canada.
Wow.
My particular dojo, my Kyoshi dominant, he I informed him about this event and I asked him to challenge me. And I said, can you treat myself as a student how it might be while I'm at the event?
Hmm.
And he went out of his way to challenge me.
So kind of him.
So, but it was the best imaginable, and he made exceptions. I would be wearing a weight vest under my karate gi, performing all the karate drills and performing all the katas, right? All the stances, all the katas, all the holds, and he would give me extra. Each time he would give me extra. And he'd create challenges, very creative challenges for me outside of the dojo that would also correlate to my ability to increase my fundraising goals.
Hmm.
In addition to that, he ran jujitsu classes and he would drive me through that. So if we were doing 5-minute rounds with 1 minute rest in between, I wouldn't get that 1 minute rest. He would have me doing mountain climbers during those or wall sits with weight. But I think the important lesson here is if you truly want to be challenged, it's one thing that we challenge ourselves, but it's also important for us to ask others to challenge us, right? Ask others to help us get outside of our comfort zone, right?
Yes.
And just be open to, whatever we're being asked to do or challenged with. Okay, I'm just going to have a yes attitude to it. I'm going to go in 100%. And having somebody like that behind me and having the support of my dojo and that network and community all focused on, goals forward really helped when I got to the event. And I mean, there were certain disappointments. I remember before going in, I had asked, for example, the Murph, which is at the 12-hour mark. That's your 2-mile run and your 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats. I had asked them if I could get to those numbers using my own technique, right?
Hmm.
So instead of the 5, 10, 15 format, and they said, absolutely, it's just about getting the numbers done in time. And then sure enough, I get to the event and they said, nope. They said no.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I have trained tirelessly for this. I trained so hard, but I knew even trying their method at home with the way the wrist injury was at the time, I was not able to achieve their format within the allotted time. I was hitting 80 minutes. And I remembered hearing that if you don't hit the allotted time, you're out.
Yeah.
So I remember at the event hearing this, and there was a moment where I felt defeated. I was like, okay, so I went in having this permission, and now it's a no. But I only let it last a minute. I'm like, that's fine. Okay. I'm just going to go in and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I actually ended up being 10 minutes faster than any time that I'd ever tried at home. So I was done it in 65 minutes. I got it done. And I remember even that last mile, I felt like concrete in my
Mm.
legs and I'm pushing it. And like, if I could have, it's only a mile, it's only 1.6 kilometers. I remember thinking if I could walk this, I probably would, but I'm just going to keep forcing myself through it. And I got that done. And the best part of that experience was being told no. The best part was having that initial defeat and saying, well, that's okay. What's the worst case that can happen if I just try? Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And those, um, I don't, I have much less scale of experience with these events, but I'm training for it in April. And, they say like the reason to do the event, right, is to show yourself that you have 20 times more potential than you think
Mm-hmm.
that you do, 20 times more capacity. And I think of all those little moments, like sometimes doing those types of events where you learn like really the hard way, right? Like a really hard way that you have
Right.
so much more in you than you ever before believed, really gives you confidence to do like the little everyday things with
Right.
20%, 20 times more than what might otherwise in your mind you believe available. And that's where it's like doing those types of events and those types of physical challenges. For some, I hear people say all the time, like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, number one, because I can. Number
Yep.
two, because it's hard. And I need
Right.
to do hard things because that's how I grow. I need to be uncomfortable so that I can grow. When you think about some of your whys for doing these events, you've mentioned the causes that you get to support. What other reasons, like what pulls you to pursue these things?
So the one thing that, there's a lot of people that look at the things that I do, for example, on Instagram and Facebook, and they say they'd like to build more fitness and well-being into their lives. And I always ask them, what is your goal? Right? Because if your goal is to lose weight, it's not a goal. That's not going to get you out of bed, right?
Right.
So my why is initially my purpose. So my purpose to serve others. And the best way to serve others is to serve yourself first, right? The one thing that I tell my son, he's 7 now, he turns 8 in February, is if you're thinking good, you're going to feel good.
Mm,
And the best way to care for your mind is to care for your body, right? But you also have to care for them together. And when I take on these things and I focus on my why and my purpose to serve my community and to be present and there for those around me, that's really what gets me out of bed initially. Having said that, when it becomes something that you practice daily, it also becomes something that's hardwired.
yes.
So there's been periods of time, I mean, life has its ups and downs, and there's devastating things that happen in life, and you get those days, and I've had them. I've had, weeks, sometimes a month, depending on how serious a situation might be, where you don't necessarily want to do it,
Yeah.
right? But if you're following the system that you've created in your life, then by default, you will automatically do what you've conditioned yourself to do simply by design.
Yeah.
So it's a discipline that becomes you. You
Yeah.
just wake up, and just by the act of starting your day, you will do everything that you've set out to do. But you
Yeah.
have to build that first.
Yeah, and it takes some commitment, right? Because it is easier to fall back on an old pattern. But I love what you're saying, that once this becomes your new pattern, that is what you fall back to when you get out of the routine, right? And
That's
that's
right.
so powerful. Um, and I think there's really something to be said about for any person who pursues like real physical discipline and training, like especially in the way that you do. There's really something to be said for acknowledging your body on any given day, right? Like if you wake up and there is just like an overwhelming sense of like, I am not meant to do what I had originally set out to do today, it's such an interesting mental process to
Hmm.
evaluate that
Yes.
sensation, right?
Hmm.
Like, is there something happening in me where it would be better to do yoga or go for a nice long walk today? Or is there something in me that's like actually pulling me away from the thing I'm trying to pursue? And then we get to learn even more about ourselves because there's so much information in there. Yeah, I
Right.
love that though, that it becomes the habit and it does become your default.
So that's actually another point to touch on, right? So many people think that being regimented is being disciplined, and that is not the case,
Right.
right? So being regimented is actually easy because it's predictable. And the fact about life is not predictable.
No.
So flexibility and adaptability are your true discipline. It actually takes a
Yeah.
lot more discipline to be flexible, because it means that you are capable of letting go of what you can't control. You might have days where you wake up and you have to listen to your body, and that's not a lack of discipline, right?
Right.
It might be leg day, but doesn't mean you can't switch it to arm day.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the same token, there might be things that change in your schedule or don't go according to plan when you're driving your car down the road, right?
Hmm.
And it's just that ability to say, that's fine. This wasn't the path that I had planned for today, but it doesn't mean that I can't take a new path to get to where my destination is,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
can always change it up if you are focused on the solution. And it's one thing, let's put it to something like when I was riding a motorcycle or learning to ride a motorcycle. I remember going for my M2, and of course, you practice in a parking lot. And when you're in a car, it's easy. You're driving in the car and you're driving to where you want to go. You want to go around a turn, you're driving around, you turn the wheel like this, and you turn the corner, right? When you're on a motorcycle, you actually have to look ahead of the turn.
Hmm.
So the temptation when you're on a motorcycle is you want to look in front of you, because you feel like if you look away, the bike's going to fall over. The problem is, if you don't look ahead of the turn to where you want to be, then you'll crash.
Wow.
Hmm.
I don't know enough people who ride motorcycles apparently, because I've never heard that before. But I love that. I also, Kimberly, what's coming up for me as you're talking about like that discipline and the difference between being regimented and disciplined, the thing that really stands out for me is the word discipline has become so like almost like punishment oriented that we like
Right,
the discipline is somehow like we're putting ourselves through something that's terrible to be
right,
disciplined. But the way that we're talking about it here in the example that you're giving is what the word is actually meant to mean, which is that the word is meant to mean to teach.
that's right.
And as we become disciplined to ourselves, we can take any single moment, any single experience. And if we are disciplined to being present to what we said we wanted, to what our intention is, we have an opportunity to learn from that experience. And so physical training is, to be honest, the reason it's so awesome is because it's a fairly easy way to have those things become present to us so that we can learn and grow. And I
Right,
just love that we get to pursue that. Like we get to opt into it. We get to embrace challenge. We get to train our body. We get to train our emotions. We get to learn. Like there's so many things that are happening just because we decided to move our bodies.
I'm excited that this podcast is brought to you by mkforhealth.com. Have you been looking for a powerful antioxidant to help support your immune health? Hello, of course we have. Look no further. mkforhealth.com offers an amazing product called Nutrimetrics OPC3. This product is an isotonic capable food supplement chock full of powerhouse antioxidants. Ingredients like citrus extract bioflavonoids, bilberry, grapeseed, red wine, and pine bark extracts, all incredible antioxidants. Then you have the OPCs. The oligomeric proanthocyanidins are bioflavonoids found in fruits, vegetables, and certain tree barks that have exceptional benefit to the human body. Studies have shown that these OPCs are up to 20 times more powerful than vitamin C and 50 times more powerful than vitamin E in neutralizing free radicals. Hello, sign me up for that. Nutrimetrics OPC3 also contains the only isotonic form of pygaginol in the world. Number 1, remember, isotonic, readily absorbed. Number 2, pygaginol, my new favorite word, is a natural plant extract from the bark of a French maritime pine tree, and it is the most clinically researched and potent bioflavonoid found. If you're ready to support your immune health and modulate inflammation in your system, all with incredible powerhouse antioxidants, natural extracts, and ingredients, this is your product. Go to www.mkforhealth.com to purchase your Nutrimetrics OPC3 today. That's www.mk, the number 4, health.com.
Well, the most recent challenge that I completed, which was, it was an 80-kilometer ultra marathon,
Wow.
which ended up being 84 kilometers.
Perfect.
And, a lot of the time, if you look at any of my social pages, it can appear to be that I'm about fitness, but it's really more about mindset. So exactly what you were saying, it's the physical that drives our mindset. And if there's any perfect example, it would be that last race. And there were so many different pillars there, including, 30 kilometers in, I'm feeling pretty injured. It was an extremely technical trail. It was a new route. First time they changed it, I think in 28 years or 23
Wow.
years. There was an extremely high dropout rate. And this one particular stretch that the majority of people in the group referred to as soul crushing.
Oh, perfect.
And I was at a point where every footstep hurt a lot. And it had started in my knee, and I'd had issues in my knee before I started this race. And it was where my fibula was. And then both feet felt at the same time like they were stuck in vice grips. And I remembered thinking, all the times that I was face planting, like, come on, right? I got to stay on my feet at this point, right? But I had to commit to each step in front of me, knowing that each step was going to be absolutely excruciating. And I went through the process of self-assessment first, right? So I'm here, it's a race. I've never quit anything in my life. Having said that, if this is something serious, you have to have the humility to know when to tap, right? So is this something where if I proceed, is it going to take away from the mother that I can be, or the healthy person that I can be, or even to my family in general in the long term, right? And I was able to assess that. I was like, okay, let's see what type of pain this is and how far I can go and what I can do to mitigate, actual serious threat or damage. And then it was just recognizing, okay, I'm actually doing this for a little boy, right? And it's hopefully to give this little boy a chance to walk if he receives the cure in time, the whole reason that I was raising funds through this race, right? And I shifted my mindset in that moment to realize and recognize that this was a privilege that I get to do this. The fact that I can choose to sign up for something like this and put myself out there and do it is a privilege. It's a privilege that, little boys like Michael currently don't have, and we hope to have. So it's not something that I have to do, but it's something that I get to do, right? And shifting from that to kind of a mindset of gratitude, followed by positivity, right? And it doesn't eliminate the pain that you're feeling, but what it does do is it changes the way that you partner with it, right?
Yeah, the relationship to it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. Tell us just a little bit, because I know this was an important cause for you. Tell us a little bit about this last race and what you were supporting by running it.
So the race itself isn't designated to any charity. I had actually reached out, it's the Halliburton Forest Race. I had reached out in advance and asked them for consent to attach my race to a charity. And I was pleasantly surprised that, apparently people have asked before in the past to do the same thing, and they're very supportive towards allowing people to run for their cause, right? This is a little boy that I heard about just before 2019, and he's the only child in Canada with this neurodegenerative disease. It's called sparapelastic SPG 50.
Yeah.
The name escapes me at the moment.
It's all good. They have such long names, all of the combination. It's so hard.
I say it all the time, but for some reason, brain freeze.
Yeah, it's all good.
But essentially, he's the only child in Canada with this condition, which is both a blessing and a curse, because as a parent, if your child is going through something like this, and it's the only child in Canada or in your country, where's your starting point?
Yeah.
Right. Having said that, they've worked tirelessly over the last couple of years to find a cure, and they actually managed to develop the cure. So
Wow.
originally, fundraising was about developing the cure. And then now that they had it, the current fundraising that I was doing was to help it go through clinical trials, FDA
Mm,
approval, and hopefully the surgery. Now, the blessing part of it is Michael being the only child in Canada with this. There's no question in Canada who this cure would go to first,
mm, mm.
right? So
Wow.
he has hope. And the name of the drug is actually Milpita, which means Michael's hope.
Oh, love that. Wow, that's remarkable.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that you have these big whys that drive doing these types of events. It's really powerful. And I love that switch to I get to, and it is a privilege. And I can because I can for somebody else who maybe can't or can't right now, like how much power that has in it. Um, really beautiful. I'm so interested to know. So these events are challenging. I can only imagine the volume of time that this type of training means for you on a daily basis. And, I think for so many of the parents listening, one of the main challenges that comes up over and over again is time.
Mhm.
Like, how do you create this? How do you have the capacity to train in this way while being a mother and a wife and a career woman and all the things that are part of life at this stage?
Yep. Well, there's always time for what you truly want.
Yeah.
And it starts with that. So if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. There won't be any excuse for why you can't. And I've had different career capacities. There's times where, for example, with Staples, I was working in the office and that role was so busy that I was often working 15 to 18-hour days,
Oh, wow.
but I still found a way to do it, right? And when I had a more balanced role after that, I would find time to go out on my lunch hour, right? You can eat your lunch at your desk and do your physical activity on your lunch break, right?
Yeah.
So those are ways that I found. Now that I've been working from home the past almost 4 years, I get up early. So my routine has shifted. I'll get up at 4 a.m. to start my career day. And then that gives me, let's say an hour in the morning where I want to work out. And again, I'll eat my lunch at my desk and then do something at lunch hour, depending on how extensive my training is at the time. It always
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, not being afraid to switch it up. A lot of people have a schedule or plan in place that they think stays the same all the time. Number one, you're going to get bored of that and you're going to lose your why. You're going to lose your focus on it. It's important to say, okay, I'm gonna, every 3 or 4 months, switch it up, do something new, learn a new skill. It doesn't mean you can't go back to the old skills or even go back to the new skills, right? You have your staples and things that you're going to stick with. For example, for myself, I plan to always be dedicated and committed to martial arts because I believe on the power and impact of them, right?
Mm.
Uh, Pull-ups and push-ups and core are staples that I won't give up, calisthenics, things like that, right? But it's about what can I let go of in order to hold on to more of what I want and
Mm.
more of what I want to see in my life. But there's no question, if you want something in your life, then if you focus on that want, you won't have any excuse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so, so true. And sometimes I think that for someone who maybe isn't yet in the practice of consistently moving their body, it's like take those small steps so that you know what it feels like to move your body 10 minutes a day, right? Like just
Right.
because that sensation is so informative for like wanting to continue to walk toward it. I
Mm-hmm.
also love what you're saying about like intentionally changing it up, because then it gives physical movement even another layer of training our mental capacity, which is that I can train myself to be adaptable simply by changing up what I choose to do for my physical activity. And
Right.
then if I'm learning a new skill, I'm going to opt into like learning to fail a little bit, right?
That's
And
right.
instead of having that be a failure, having that be my opportunity to learn. Like these physical practices, like they are training us on every level of who we are if we let them, right? Like it's really easy to
Yep.
get stuck in that routine and I do this one thing and only this one thing. But if we allow it to be more than that, like there's just so much available for us. It's remarkable.
Another thing that is equally critical, and I do this in pretty much every aspect in my life, we've all heard of setting your intentions for the day. So the same way that I would do that for my career, every day I'll put down a list of things that I intend to accomplish for the day, right? You do that with your health and fitness as well. And not only do you write down your intentions, but you keep track of your, you know, success and your pillars and
Mm,
did I accomplish this and how did I accomplish it, right? And you have mindful reflection to all of those things, and it helps you over time to see your growth. And when you can see your growth and what you're accomplishing, you're that much more connected to it than if you're doing it without a sense of direction and without, a sense of what got you there.
yeah. I can tell just like from the way you speak about like these physical pursuits and the intention that you have behind them. I'm so interested to know when you think about like the lessons you hope that your son is learning from watching you do life the way that you do it. What's the intention for you there?
There's so many lessons that I want him to learn. Number one, resilience, knowing that it's okay to be scared, it's okay to be tired, it's okay to be challenged. Um, just as long as you start, just as long as you try, right? The other lessons are to focus on his own mindset and well being. There was a
Mhm.
time, it's kind of a silly story, during COVID, when I saw that, his disconnect from people around him, it was really getting to him.
Mm,
And he started to take things more personally because when they start losing that social interaction and those networks of people to connect with, or kids his own age, they lose how to interact with that, right? So I would take him for drives and we'd be sitting at a red light and I would say, Ethan, look at this, right? I would roll down my car window and I'd start barking like a dog at the car next to me. And what I intended to show him through that was, look, they're looking at me like I'm a total nut job. And that's okay, right? It's okay when you put yourself out there to let things be as they are and see what comes back, right? Just
Mhm.
put yourself out there, right? And like I said, that's a silly story.
But it's
But
a beautiful story because being playful, right? Like that's where our kids learn. They have their work is play. And so the opportunity to interact in that way as a way of teaching is really a powerful example.
and it's also just don't take life too seriously, right? It's
Yeah.
got enough serious aspects to itself. You've got to be able to smile, have fun, let loose, and we can do that in all areas, right? Fitness doesn't have to be punishment. It can be challenging, doesn't mean that challenging is a punishment. And
Right.
going back to what I said in the beginning, we are lucky to live in a country where the opportunities are endless.
Mhm. It's so true. And it is a I get to instead of I have to for sure.
That's right.
When you think it's really been just hitting home, maybe more so now than ever in the last few months. So I'm interested to ask you just, the intentions you have for what you want to teach your son and being clear about that, I think is so powerful. What is your sense for like the most important thing that your son is teaching you right now?
Patience,
Mm.
I think. He's
Kids
a
are
really
really good at that.
to me, patience is one of the most valuable skills and life components that you can have. And kids are very good at keeping that in check and helping you to self assess. And, patience teaches us to slow down and breathe and think about things from all different vantage points, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. You've mentioned a couple of times, like as one of your pillars, that silence and sort of quietness that you need to really be fully present and do what you need to do. Do you have like a specific practice around that that you'd be interested in sharing? I'm always, I'm always interested in what people do in this regard.
Absolutely. So being able to sit back and do absolutely nothing. So the ability to not have a screen, not have anything to look at or to do, but to just sit and have time with yourself. And there's many different ways that you can go about this. I've got a couple of things that are part of my daily routines, which is number one, how I wake up in the morning. So when I open my eyes, I start with breathing exercises. You might be familiar with box breathing.
Yes.
And while I'm doing the box breathing, I'll focus on the things that I'm grateful for in my life. And it doesn't have to be the same thing every day. It can be something different, but not just focusing on a name or a word for what I'm grateful for, but actually focusing on why I'm grateful for it. I think that allows us to be more introspective about it, right? And I try to teach this with my son as well. I'll start his day off the same way, and I'll start him with positive affirmations and situations like that.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've always taught him is we can't give it our all if not all of us is there, right?
I love that.
So you have to fully show up, and the only way to do that is to mute outside distractions and mute outside input, and just give yourself that time and opportunity and space to be self-aware. He'll always come to me and, he'll say at times, I'm bored. And my response is always good.
Yeah, I know. Amazing. You're bored. That's terrific. These days, that's like a gift from God. Like you have space to actually think and do something and find what you're interested in and passionate about. Like, oh my gosh, bored is like my new favorite word.
Well, you know what? So what makes you uncomfortable with it, right? And I'll have him really think about it. Why don't you like it? What do you feel you're missing in that space, right? Is it harming you?
Right.
Right? So actually putting conscious mindfulness to it and teaching him ways how he can show up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the possibility to like teach awareness to our children as a skill that they have as young people is so powerful, right? Because that was, I think I probably had like moments of understanding of that, like in younger years, but I never had like specific practices around it until I was an adult. And, like any capacity to be present, like to the moment is just so remarkable. And I like the chance to teach any one child that capacity is really remarkable. I love that you have that intention with your son. So you just ran this ultra. Do you have like a next big challenge on your docket, or is it a wait and see, like what cause resonates with you? Like, how do you decide sort of what comes next for you?
Funny enough, they've always kind of appeared in my life. And that's what I'm waiting for at the moment. There's never any rush, right?
Yeah.
I don't believe in resting on your laurels, but I also don't believe in rushing with indecision, right? So at the moment, I'm training as I was. I'm focused on all the staples that I typically focus on, including, like I said, my martial arts. And when the right time comes, I'll set the goal. And typically I like to have one major goal per year. And I can see myself in this case, I would like to see success for Michael. It might be something that I continue to pursue. If not in the fitness scope of things, then, I might put on another production for him, but I want to see that one through.
Yeah.
I want to see him be okay. And I also believe in what the family is doing to support other families. One thing that's amazed me is if my own son were going through something like this, I'm not sure where my conscious focus would be. But in their case, the fact that they have capacity not only for their own son, but to take on other kids around the world and use their organization to now support those kids as well is extremely admirable. So this cause itself and organization may become that staple that I choose to pursue full time, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, it doesn't mean that I can't take on more than the one.
Yes.
But it's following the run. I went through my rest and recovery, and now just, building back in and figuring out the new path.
Yeah. Yeah, I love and doing that with intention and not just like moving ahead just
For the sake of it.
for the sake of it. Yeah, that's really powerful. Where can people find out more about supporting this cause for Michael?
www.curespg50.org.
Okay. We'll make sure we include that in our show notes too. Just thank you so much, Kimberly, for sharing what this journey has looked like for you, and just hearing like the passion and the compassion in your voice, and in the work, like the way that you pursue these events with such intention. I know a lot of people who pursue gnarly physical challenges, and it's not selfish because they see what they need to learn, like they see what they need to go through to become the type of person who does important work in the world. And so it's super valuable. But the fact that you're already in a space where you're pursuing these events as a means of serving others is really a powerful place to be in, and doing that all as a mother and the balance of it all, I think will really be inspiring to a lot of people. So I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Absolutely. And I appreciate having the opportunity for such a great conversation.
Yeah, awesome. All right, you guys, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure to be here with you and talk with amazing people like Kimberly Biback. What a gift this conversation was. And we will catch you all soon. Take care.